quick update on the Utah Jazz, because I think this is something that people are all fired up about. Talked to a guy yesterday who said the Utah Jazz have a quote-unquote ridiculous asking price for Lauri Markkanen. And I think that is, in my opinion, why they don't have a direction. And I think this is a huge problem for the Jazz right now. I think the best Jazz beat writer by far is a gentleman named Tony Jones, who writes for The Athletic. He said yesterday on a local Utah radio station, ESPN 700, that Lauri Markkanen prefers to stay in Utah and will not sign a contract until August 7th to make sure he stays in Utah this year. And after talking to some people, once I heard that from Tony, I reached out to some people who said, for instance, that they asked San Antonio for Johnson and for Vassell and for multiple first-round picks. And then you hear the confirmations of the stories that we've talked about on this show and reported that Podziemski and Kuminga were the starting point, not even the top, not even the finishing. That the Jazz didn't want Jonathan Kuminga. If they were going to make a Markkanen trade with Golden State, that it was going to have to include Podziemski and multiple first-round picks. So the asking price is quote-unquote ridiculous, according to my sources. And I don't understand what the Utah Jazz are doing here, and I want to. Tony Jones also said yesterday on ESPN 700 in Salt Lake that they're working toward Cooper Flagg. So let me see if I understand this. You're going to have Markkanen, John Collins, Jordan Clarkson, and Colin Sexton on this team. And are you just not going to play them? Because if you are working towards Cooper Flagg, which I think is 100% the right decision, if you are working towards Cooper Flagg, are you telling me that to get to Cooper Flagg, you're going to play your veterans? You're not going to play your veterans. So let me get this right then. You're not going to play your veterans. You're going to pay Lauri Markkanen by renegotiating and extending his contract, not being able to trade him this coming season because the 6-month moratorium after he signs that deal. You're going to make the exact same mistake you made with Jordan Clarkson, who now has little to no trade value. Your only real active trade avenue here is Colin Sexton. And now you're going to try and sell me a bill of goods that you are moving towards Cooper Flagg. That's just not common sense in the NBA. Explain to me if, in fact, because I told you the other day on the show, I think it's 50-50. And if Tony Jones says it, I think it is probably true. I think Tony Jones is dialed in. I think he's one of the best beat writers in the NBA, and I think he certainly is head and shoulders above anybody else in Salt Lake City. If Tony Jones says that they're not going to trade Lauri Markkanen, I'm going to guess they're not going to trade Lauri Markkanen. And if that is in fact true, I am shocked and stunned at the lack of direction and franchise building that is happening in this organization. I simply do not understand what the Utah Jazz are doing.
Yeah, and I think that, we Jazz Nation and Jazz fans and, all the people that listen to this show that, love this team and this organization, I think are baffled by it as well. I hear, we hear on the show all the time, like Jazz fans saying, yeah, we don't understand what the team is doing. And I don't know. Like, I'm happy to speculate on why they're doing this or not doing this, frankly. I think it's because your owner's distracted. I think that you're not willing to give your front office guys what they need to go out and build a team right now. And I don't know. I'm going to guess, again, speculating my opinion, that Ryan likes some guys on the roster. Ryan would like to keep Lauri. Ryan wanted to keep Jordan Clarkson. Maybe Ryan's not as concerned with going out and getting Cooper Flagg. I don't know what else it could be, because what I do know is Danny Ainge is not doing this.
I don't understand this the Ryan Smith quotient is a big conundrum, because I do believe, based on what I've been told by Jazz sources, that Ryan Smith does not want to look like he stripped this team down to save money. I am told public perception matters to Ryan Smith significantly. Make your plan and stick to it. If the plan is Cooper Flagg, you can't have Lauri Markkanen on this team, because you're going to pay him not to play. Because, again, as I told you 3 weeks ago, sources with the Jazz told us this is a youth movement. They are playing the young guys. End of story. No conversation to be had. They are playing the young guys. And I think it is as clear as you can make it that now, and again, maybe I'm putting too much belief in Tony Jones, but Tony Jones is not often a guy that is wrong. And I think the only thing that gives me pause here is that this is the exact scenario that played out with Donovan Mitchell. Because at the time of the Donovan Mitchell trade, you'll remember, we reported that they were holding on to, and I believe the words we used were, they're going to keep Donovan Mitchell and build around him.
Right.
And 2 hours later, what did Adrian Wojnarowski say? The Jazz are going to keep Donovan Mitchell and build around him. And then what did they do? 3 weeks later, they traded him. It's very eerily similar. Hey, I'm not trading Donovan unless we get some crazy offer. Well, they got a crazy offer and they made that deal. And now my question is that where this organization is at with Lauri Markkanen?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, it is kind of a hedging strategy, if you will. Sort of like, hey, we're going to put it out into some back channel media options, guys like Tony, we're going to basically put it out into our circles that we're not moving this guy, in this case, Markkanen, unless we get a huge offer. And we're going to make it feel like we don't want to move him. And then we're going to move him. So that way, when we do move him, people aren't like, oh, well, they're just cutting down the organization.
And just to be clear, again, I want to reiterate exactly what we've reported. They have multiple offers on the table. They do not want Jonathan Kuminga. And Keldon Johnson is not a guy from San Antonio that they believe can be the centerpiece of a deal. They've asked about a Johnson-Vassell swap, where at least intimated that's the starting point. And I think that's the starting point for the biggest reason being that gets them out of John Collins' contract. If you look at the numbers, it is very easy to see the Jazz making a Lauri, John Collins, other guy deal for Vassell and other guys on that roster, draft picks and pick swaps. That's a deal in San Antonio that could absolutely be made if the Jazz were going to make that deal. And I also want to be very clear. I have not been told by, and I have a really good source inside the Jazz, a really good source who's been really accurate. I have never been told by my source at the Jazz that they are absolutely keeping Lauri. I have not been told that. I've been told they're going to play the young guys. I have been told that they are not married to one side of Lauri Markkanen or the other, which means, hey, we'll trade him. Hey, we'll keep him. I think they would be thrilled to keep him, but I think they'd be just as thrilled to trade him. I don't believe that there's some emotional tie to Lauri Markkanen. I think that Golden State doesn't have the horses to make that deal, and they've not been able to trade Andrew Wiggins. But what else did I tell you about Zach LaVine? And everybody hopped on the parade and told me that I don't know what I'm talking about. And anybody see the story that came out yesterday on Zach LaVine and the Chicago Bulls? Zach LaVine is wildly unpopular with his teammates. And that during his time in Chicago, they've done it his way and it hasn't worked. And it's time for him to go. In a couple of weeks, what did I tell you? A couple of weeks ago, he asked to be traded. And now you're seeing anonymous Bulls players saying, we've done it his way and it didn't work. It's time for him to go.
Yeah.
I think that's very interesting. And I think if Golden State were able to make a deal with the Bulls to unload Andrew Wiggins, we're having a different conversation. But I also think, as Tony Jones reported as well, it makes a lot of sense. The Jazz are they have the exact right amount of cap space open to extend Lauri Markkanen. Their options are open. They're on the table. They can do whatever they want. And I think here we are on the last day of July. I think this weekend is make or break time for the Jazz to make that deal, because San Antonio is going to make a deal one way or the other. And it'll be interesting to see who that ends up being. And will they end up moving Keldon Johnson and or Vassell to make that deal happen? We'll find out. Will they make a deal with the Jazz? I think it's more likely the Spurs make a deal than it is Golden State. But I'm going to stick at 50-50 with this Lauri Markkanen deal. I just am far less confident now that Golden State can make that deal happen.
Yeah, I mean, and that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you got to have the value to get the deal done, and they just don't have it yet. And I think this. I just want the Jazz to take a definitive heading. That's all I want them to do. I don't even care what that heading is. Like I've said so many times, like I agree with the Cooper Flag strategy, but what I don't
100%.
agree with is sitting here. Like the point you just made about how they've kept enough cap space open to do the extension with Markkanen, but they're also having all these conversations about potential trade options.
But what really are they doing? They're doing the exact same thing that they did with Don and the Knicks. They're doing the exact same thing they did with Rudy. They're holding the NBA hostage. That's what the Jazz are doing. And I know that it pissed off Jazz fans when I talked to an agent a couple of weeks ago now, whenever it was. People are tired of Danny Ainge's act. And I think at some point and if it's not now, it may be, but at some point it's going to hurt Danny Ainge that he routinely does this, where he will just sit around and, like a guy was telling me that Danny Ainge just doesn't call you back. You just sit there and you wait. And why is that? Because he's got the best available player on the NBA market right now. And you'll have a conversation like, oh man, can't wait. Yeah. All right. Hey, send it over. Let's really move on this. Send it over. And then you just don't hear from him. And you're just twisting in the wind. Yeah. And it's what happened with John Collins. And that deal finally got done. That deal with the Knicks never got done. But he did get moved to Cleveland, obviously. It's just this modus operandi that Danny Ainge employs, where he's not going to do anything he doesn't want to do, and he's going to do whatever he does want to do on his own time. And I think it frustrates people.
Yeah.
And I will just say again, what basketball IQ would you utilize to keep Lauri Markkanen, John Collins, Colin Sexton, to keep this group of veterans, Jordan Clarkson, on this roster and have a belief that you can still get Cooper Flag?
Yeah.
And if you're Ryan Smith, I don't think Ryan Smith is unintelligent. Are you really going to pay this group of veterans to sit around and not play? And if you're a Jazz fan, if you buy tickets this season, this is your fault.
Yeah.
If you watch games, this is your fault. If you subscribe to Jazz Plus, this is your fault. Because if they do not trade Lauri Markkanen, and I'll also go as far as to say, if they don't trade Markkanen and Sexton, it's a huge mistake. They can live with. It's a huge mistake. Double the mistake it was to keep Jordan Clarkson on this roster.
Yeah, and I think you also have examples of other teams in your own conference who did what you should be doing and now are competing at the top of the conference. I don't know, like the Oklahoma City Thunder, who had a bunch of these young guys and some guy named Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who nobody had ever heard of, who had this weird-ass name. and now all of a sudden the guy's in the MVP conversation because he got developed. You know, like, hey, you stayed at the top of the draft and you got Chet, you know, and then you went out and made some deals and really put a roster together, and it took you about 4 years to do it, but you did it. Like, that's what you have to do. And I find it fascinating that yeah, you're essentially out here in the public trying to put up this perception that, hey, yeah, we're doing everything we can do to make this team better, and we want to win, and we're putting Utah on the map and the hockey club, and everything's amazing, and let's put out pictures of Lauri and Key in Sweden or whatever the hell, wherever the hell they were, you know, practicing together. It all feels great. But it's not going to feel great when you're winning too many games, but not enough games to do anything. That's the worst. We say it on the show all the time.
But it's where this team has been.
For how long?
How long have we been talking about draft assets?
What,
how
5
long?
years?
A decade. How long have we been talking about shitty draft? How long have we been talking about the Dante Exums? How long have we been talking about not developing young guys?